We spoke last week about stalactites and stalagmites. In the Lost Sea is a huge underground body of water that is located deep in a cave in Tennessee. There are many stalactites and stalagmites. The ones hanging from the ceiling are called stalactites, and the ones hanging from attached to the floor are called stalagmites. How do they form? Water above the cave seeps through the ground. As it does, a mineral called calcium carbonate gets mixed in with the water. Eventually, the mineral-filled water seeps through the sides or ceilings of a cavern. Evolution says that must take a long time. Many people used to think so. But scientists have discovered that it does not take that long. In fact, some stalactites have grown as big as 5 feet in only 45 years. They grow especially quickly in tropical areas where it rains a lot, and the rainwater seeps through the ground. Stalactites and stalagmites that once were thought to have taken more than 10,000 years to grow could have grown in just a few hundred years. Many who believe in evolution claim that stalagmites and stalagmites grow very slowly. They suggest it would have taken thousands or even millions of years for these stalactites to form, and that's just not true. Today we know they can form very quickly. In fact, one stalagmite found in Carlsberg Caverns in New Mexico and pictured in the National Geographic magazine had a bat preserved in it. The dead bat had fallen on the stalagmite, and before it had time to decay, the stalagmite had grown over it. Stalactites often form in man-made structures that are known to be only a few hundred years old, or a few years old. In Washington, D.C., at the Lincoln Memorial, there's a picture from 1968 that shows stalactites have grown to be over 5 feet long in 45 years since the monument was built in 1923. From 1924 to 1988, there was a visitor sign above the entrance to Carlsbad Caverns that said Carlsbad was at least 260 million years old. In 1988, the sign was changed to read 7 to 10 million years old. Then for a little while, the sign read that it was 2 million years old. Now the sign is gone altogether. Stalactites, stalagmites can appear on caves and in man-made objects. This is Mother Shipton's cave in Yorkshire. The locals tie up all sorts of different things, little hats, little dolls, and little teddy bears, and within a very short period of time, they end up as stalactites. They end up as fossils. This is very amusing. It's actually quite a lot of visitors come to see them, and are quite amazed at how short a time these things can happen. The same thing happens here Castle in County Tipperary in Ireland, and you can see the fossilization taking place on the outside of this church building door. One tunnel in Raccoon Mountain near Chattanooga, Tennessee, was blasted out the rock in 1977. In a few years since it was created, stalactites have formed. Also, several other man-made bridges and tunnels, especially in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, had stalactites hanging from them. Stalactites do not take millions or even thousands of years to form. Even though some stalactites are forming very slowly today, that does not mean that they always formed slowly. Since we know they can form very quickly, then it's a possibility that they also formed quickly in time past. Interesting thing about coal mining. In 50 years, these World War II plains were covered by 250 feet of Greenland ice. Cold mining is simply a process of boring through ice. The main tool used in the process is hot water. Various devices were designed, tested and used to recover glacier gel, but all of them utilized hot water as a melting agent. The first step to the recovery process was setting up the base camp, which included a shelter for the coal mining apparatus. Using a steam probe and 8-foot steel rod of trailing 300 feet of steel reinforced tubing, the team located Glacier Girdle. 268 feet of 1-inch steel pipe was run down the resulting hole to act as a guide for the Super Gopher. Once it aboard out of the plane, the crew descended and used a hot water cannon to carve a 50-foot wide cavern around Glacier Girdle. The lost squadron was covered by 268 feet of ice in 48 years. One P-38 is now restored and flying at air shows, and they've called her Glacier Girdle. He told me the many hundreds of layers of the person doing all the mining in this way told us that many hundreds of layers of ice above the plains when they dug them out. Here's another fossil. Dr. Colin Patterson said, "It's true that for the last 18 months or so, I've been kicking around non-evolutionary or even anti-evolutionary ideas." He said, I think always before in my life, when I've got up to speak on a subject, I've been confident of one thing. I know more about that subject than anyone in the room because I worked in it. Well, this time, it isn't true. He said, I'm speaking on two subjects, evolutionism and creationism. I believe it's true to say that I know nothing whatever about either of them. One of the reasons I started taking this anti-evolutionary view, or let's call it a non-evolutionary view, was last year. I had a sudden realization that for over 20 years, I had thought I was working on evolution in some way. One morning I woke up and something had happened at night, and it struck me I've been working on this stuff for 20 years, and there was not one thing I really knew about it. That's quite a shock to learn that one can be so misled for so long. Either there was something wrong with me, or there was something wrong with evolutionary theory. Naturally, I knew there was nothing wrong with me, so for the last few weeks, I've tried putting together a simple question to various people and groups of people. The question is, can you tell me anything you really know about evolution? Any one thing that is actually true. I tried a question on the geological staff and field museum of the natural history. The only answer I got was silence. I tried on members of the evolutionary morphology seminar in the University of Chicago, a very prestigious body of evolutionists, and all I got was silence for a long time. And eventually, one person said, I do know one thing, it ought not to be taught in high school. Dr. Patterson is a senior paleontologist from the British Museum of Natural History. The God we serve made the world and everything in it. He is Lord of heaven and earth. He doesn't dwell in temples made with hands. He is not worshipped with men's hands. He made from one blood every nation of men, determined man's times and boundaries, and he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our very being.